Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hi everyone, welcome to another video on the JayBee
Hello.
and Milly channel. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Morgan Baden.
Hey everyone.
So we are so excited to be talking to you about your new book, which came out only kind of about a week ago, I think now, and we've certainly enjoyed reading it. We've both managed to get through it, and we're so happy we did. I think we both kind of read it in about a day. So if for anybody listening they've not read it yet, then we certainly recommend doing that. And we've also tried to keep these questions, like we say, not too specific, to make sure that there is still the mystery element of that there, of like this here, if you are hearing this before you finish the book. So I guess my first question is, because we enjoyed the second book of the Daphne and Velma series so much, which of course you did as well, how long after writing that did you know that the third book was going to be, coming out, that you're going to start writing that?
So good question. I actually, they hired me to write both books at once. So I knew as I was writing the second book that there would be a third. We were also hoping there would be another trilogy set beyond that, which is why, no spoilers, but why there's an ending where you could see an author taking it to another direction as well. So I wanted to make sure to leave a little bit of room for another build if there's going to be one. But yeah, so I finished book 2 and took a couple weeks break and then immediately started writing book 3.
Oh, yeah. So that's kind of good, because going through book number 3, you can see that it stays quite tonally consistent and character consistent in compared to the second book. So it makes absolute sense that both of them were kind of in your mind at the same time. But I mean, would you say that one took longer to write than another, or how long did it take you to write the third installment?
Oh, that's interesting. This was, keep in mind, the very start of the pandemic. So it feels like a lifetime ago, right? I think I had only a couple of months to write book 2. And then book 3 was also a very tight turnaround. I think I had about 3 months to write it. But then we knew, not to get too insider baseball here, but by the time that spring of 2020 rolled around, Scholastic knew that the book was probably going to be a little bit delayed due to COVID printing issues. And so we really took our time with edits. So we were sort of given the gift of time in that instance. So it didn't take me long to write it. But then my editor, Beth Dunphy, who's amazing, she and I then were able to sort of stretch out the editing process pretty much as long as we needed to, which was really refreshing. And so the editing process for book 3 was significantly longer than the one for book 2.
Well, that's really interesting to kind of hear more about the process. And I guess you were saying that the initial write was kind of under quite tight time constraints. So how did writing the third book differ from the second? Because this, or at least preparation wise, because obviously this was no longer your first interaction with the characters.
Yeah, definitely easier in some ways, right? Because I still had both Daphne and Velma's voices in my head very strongly. So it was a lot easier to sort of dive right back in. And it was also, in a way, I almost want to say it's more fun. When you have one out of the way, that pressure is kind of off. And so I felt a lot freer in book 3 to experiment and explore. And again, no spoilers, but there's a pretty significant event that happens in book 3 that is a pretty dark turn, right? And Beth, the editor, and I were not planning on that initially. And at one point she said, the studio has said, let's take this in a really dark direction, like as dark as we can go. And so we batted around a few ideas and ended up with, okay, let's have an actual a murder to solve as well. And so that, I just feel like that elevated the book to a whole different level, because then it was, like I said, it was a little bit darker, and there's I like darkness when it comes to writing and reading. And so there was a lot of emotions to really explore there, which I didn't get to do in book 2.
That is so interesting, because it surprises me like that, because having spoken to so many people that we've spoken to, having getting kind of an insider like kind of look into things, it seems that for so long the direction of things have been kind of so light-hearted, let's keep it light, let's keep it all kind of, so much a certain way. And now there's kind of been a little bit of a shift going on, and let's make it darker and stuff. And I guess implicit within that, when we first heard about the title Buried Secrets, of course, Buried Secrets kind of implies that something's being kept under wraps, something's being kept hidden. But I think in the context of a crime solver, the word buried implies that something's gonna be, in that position one way or another. But from your point of view, what came first, your idea of the storyline or the title?
First of all, what a good observation, because you're right that the title is sort of a play on words. And I don't think we talked about that yet, and I don't think anyone else has asked me about that yet. So like, really good observation there. Here's where I confess that Scholastic and Warner Brothers came up with the title. To my knowledge, if I recall correctly, it wasn't until pretty long after I had turned in the manuscript. So I'm guessing that was pretty intentional on their part. I know we had a list going of several title options, and then Warner Brothers and Scholastic really have the final say on that, and so they selected Buried Secrets out of the list.
And I mean, I remember doing like my first read through of the book, and when I got to the word buried secrets, I think there is mentioned somewhere in there, those two words together, and I was like, oh, it's that. Kind of like, it just stood out.
Nice.
I mean, here's the thing. Again, like with Scooby and the vibe, and you've mentioned the involvement of Scholastic and Warner Brothers, and it seems like they've done quite well here in terms of world building. But of course, in the second book and the third book, I absolutely love how you managed to make Crystal Cove seem like the third main character almost. It's Daphne, Velma, and Crystal Cove, and that remains true in the third one as well. But to what extent did, say, Scholastic and Warner say, this is what we want for the location and this is what we're going to build onto the lore, or was that more kind of your input for Crystal Cove?
Yeah, so other than the book should likely be set in Crystal Cove, they didn't give any direction on location. I am a big fan of books and movies and TV shows where a location plays, as you said, essentially a character level role. Think of New York City in Sex and the City, think of a haunted house in any sort of scary movie. I really like that atmosphere where a non-person identity plays the role kind of a person. And so with Crystal Cove in particular, I grew up on a shore town, not in California, in New Jersey, but so though that kind of atmosphere comes very easily to me because I can harken back to it really quickly, right? Like that's how I grew up. So sort of the beach in winter, the beach in fall, when it's not crowded. And I also know what it's like to live in a beach town that then gets flooded with tourists, right? So I really liked that part of book 3 where you've got the TV show is being filmed in Crystal Cove. And so suddenly there's all these people around who you don't expect, and you're running into them in the coffee shops and on the sidewalks, and that really just brings a whole new level of sort of stranger danger in a way that I really liked playing with. And so so I appreciate you noticing that. I really like atmospheric books and stories where you can really play up the environment in a really cool way.
Oh no, that's good, because like reading is like an obsession of both of us. I think it's fair to say, like, we can just take a book and we can just analyze it forever. It's just one of the things that I absolutely love to do. And these books that you've written are just, I don't know, they definitely, like, they've definitely scratched an itch that we have in terms of the kind of Scooby genre, the mystery genre, and even the YA genre in general. It's just so amazing. And you mentioned at the start that because of the delays and everything, that you had more time to, I guess, go back to the drawing board with this and to kind of do more edits. But do you remember about how many drafts or how many versions of the manuscripts that kind of came through before getting to the one that was eventually released?
So for this book, my editor and I sat down and had a pretty extensive outline, which really cuts down on the amount of post-draft editing you have to do, right? So I think I know I had one pretty significant extension once I turned in the first draft. Beth came back with some feedback, and we ended up building in a couple of different sections that didn't exist in the first draft. So that was the most extensive edition, I should say. So that was the most extensive edition. And then I think we went right into copy edits after that. So again, I like to do that legwork, the heavy lifting up front, so that you don't have to do it on the back end.
Oh, well, that's incredible. And I guess kind of going into that process a little further, like you say, there's quite often a few voices in the room and that kind of thing when it is a franchise like this. So do you remember any concepts that you had that didn't make the final draft, either because of the voices in the room or because there was the chance to do all those edits?
It was really more a matter of extra content being added in by the time we got to the second and then final draft, rather than things being removed. And that's where a really good editor is worth her weight in gold, right? So Beth is really, Beth knows this brand so well. She actually edited some of the Scooby picture books years ago. And so for her, it sort of came full circle when she then edited these books as well. And so she knows these characters, she knows the vibe. So she was so helpful when it came time to editing and saying things like, hey, let's flesh out this section a little bit more. And actually it was her insistence at the end of the book that the gang come back together to solve the mystery ultimately, because the first draft actually only had Daphne and Velma solving it together and sort of doing what they do. No spoilers. And it was her thinking of, you know, readers love the four of them together, plus Scooby. So let's bring them all together in this moment again. So, you know, hats off to her.
That is incredible. And you're definitely right in that. For all like the main characters at the heart of the series is Daphne and Velma, it is always nice when they all start to interact with each other, but kind of like a unique twist upon the gang that's throughout the books that you've written is the kind of unusual but perfect pairings of, say, you've got Velma with Fred, Shaggy with Daphne, and did you have like a particular two like people to kind of write together that people might not initially expect to interact at first?
Yeah, first of all, that was one of the most fun things, right? Was like when I was given this assignment and then read book one and I saw what Josephine Ruby had done in book one with those unusual pairings. And I thought, oh, this is going to be so fun because it's sort of non-traditional in Scooby world, right? And so it was really amazing to get to explore it like that. I also just had a lot of fun with Daphne and Velma together themselves, because I feel like you don't get that a ton in a lot of the other Scooby franchise products. And I really, you know, I'm a girl's girl. I love girl friendships. I love deep dives into that and those dynamics. And so it was really great to have Daphne and Velma together in that way too, and to play off of all of those sort of teenage girl dynamics when you're figuring out yourself and figuring out your relationships and your family and whatnot. So I don't think I could choose a favorite. I loved all of them. I loved writing Velma and Fred together. I loved writing Daphne and Shaggy together. And then obviously the girls too.
Yeah, and I think that girl friendship is actually part of the root link between Daphne and Shaggy in the end, is because Daphne, even, you know, 3 books in, still has that loyalty to Marcy, who, you know, for all we haven't heard about her for a couple of books, she's still really prominent there. And
yeah,
it's part of what kind of pushes Daphne and Shaggy together, that she wants to kind of still deliver on this promise that she made.
Yeah.
And making sure that everything turns out there, you know, for him. And obviously that, you know, is just a lovely thing to see. But there was one part of this book that I was excited to speak about, because as you said, it does take a darker turn than perhaps what anybody initially expected. And when I first saw that, like you say, they have a murder to solve, as soon as that's kind of prompted in the book, I had to stop and go back up to the top of the page. I was like, what?
Wow.
What happened there? And like went right back to the top of the page and started again to make sure I'd got it right. I was like so shocked, but also in the best possible way.
Oh, good.
So for Scooby to kind of take a turn like this, what kind of, I know you said that it was, you know, you kind of got told it could go darker than it, you know, had initially perhaps been. Kind of what process was there behind this? Was it something that had to be run past Scholastic, Warner, to kind of take that turn? Was there a process to kind of getting that through print?
Yeah, there wasn't a special process other than the final manuscript has to be vetted by obviously both Scholastic and Warner Brothers as well. And so certainly there was a risk that they wouldn't approve it. And that Warner Brothers in particular might think, okay, maybe this is slightly too off-brand for what we want to do with these books, so let's reel it back in. That risk absolutely existed. I don't know how present it was, but I felt pretty confident because I had been given that blessing from Scholastic to go there. So I felt like Warner Brothers was probably going to be okay with it too.
Yeah, okay, that's great. I mean, I think there was also like a couple of other, let's say, levels of threat within the book as well, you know, with the fire and also with the two girls at the end.
Yep.
So was that kind of something that had originated first? And then, because I know you said that initially they weren't going to be solving a murder. So was it that kind of the kind of level of threat you could go to had been established a little bit there first and then it was added in? Because I remember as well when we got to the fire bit, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like pretty much the first time we've seen one of the gang in a real life threat situation, because quite often with Scooby, you know, it's quite lighthearted, and as soon as the person's unmasked, they're no longer scary anymore,
Right.
and they no longer pose a threat. Whereas, you know, in reality, perhaps if someone had been unmasked, you know, they're still just as dangerous as ever. It's still the same person under there. So this kind of showed that there is more of a real level threat with things like fire and everything.
Yeah, another good question. I think one of my goals with these books was, yes, it's Daphne and Velma. It's characters people know. They're sort of universal. They can live at any moment in time, right? Any year. But with this trilogy in particular, it was intended to be very present day, very modern, very contemporary. And I think building in a sort of additional element of risk and danger needed to happen in order to raise the stakes in the book and to make the characters feel a little bit more contemporary. So, you know, when I look at book 2, there's a mystery and there's a little bit of danger, but it's nothing like book 3. And that was really intentional. And so I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I think, I hope readers are too, but, you know, I just wanted to pull through a bit more of a realism element to it.
I mean, I would say it's definitely the realist that I think Scooby's felt, and to like you say, just with that threat there, like it evokes certain feelings and things that Scooby doesn't normally, because you know that ultimately it's going to be okay in the end.
Yeah.
And from that first scenario with the fire, it's okay. You don't know that everything's going to be okay in the end. Like,
wow.
A lot could happen here, and it was really exciting to read.
Oh, good. I'm happy to hear that.
But of course, like, tonal maturity can take place in a number of ways, you know. Sometimes it isn't always about the kind of raising the stakes in terms of like murders and things. And something you do really well is making it tonally more mature in the fact that it deals with human psychology and the turmoil that someone going through a hard time can kind of face. And that's quite like exemplary with Shaggy in particular, going through what his father's going through, and even his whole family in general, just having the weight of that legacy upon their shoulders. And going through all 3 of the books, we have almost like a Shaggy book weaved in within the kind of 3 Daphne and Velma books. But in terms of his story arc, I mean, would you see that going, you know, further beyond the 3rd Daphne and Velma book, or how would you see that eventually planning out?
I love that question. It is my dream that then there would be a Shaggy standalone, either standalone novel or like his own separate trilogy as he explores his particular character arc in this particular Scooby universe, right? Because I think you're right, the way his family situation has been set up, particularly the dynamics with his father and his dad's business, like there's so much to mine there. And he's such an interesting character. And it's one of those things where I think if you had asked me before I actually started reading book 1 or writing books 2 and 3, I probably would have said like Shaggy is maybe my least interesting character because he's so surface level. But I think that's the beauty of having a trilogy like this, is that you can actually dive deep and make him not surface level. And book 1 sets that up so nicely, like I said. And so he was probably the most surprising character to write because I walked away from these books like you thinking, gosh, I want to dive in more. Like I want to know more about Shaggy. I want I want to follow Shaggy into his house alone at night when he's left his friends and it's just his mom and dad there. You know, like I would love to get into that with him.
Oh yeah, even like imagine just like a kind of like a bonus feature, just like Shaggy's diary, chronicling his side all throughout. That would just be amazing. But I mean, you mentioned like a Shaggy standalone or something, but what is like your dream, follow-up to Buried Secrets? Would it be Daphne and Velma for a Shaggy standalone, or Mystery Inc. in the beginning? Like, what would your like kind of ideal next step be with these characters?
Wow, that's such a hard question because I love Daphne and Velma so much. And so immediately my answer is always like, yes, I will happily write more Daphne and Velma. I would love to do another standalone, but having you just say that part about like a Shaggy diary entry really got my brain turning there, because that's such a cool idea. And so now I'm thinking, oh no, what if here's my dream. I'm going to state this right now and maybe we can manifest it together. But then there's a standalone novel that itself is a compilation of 4 diaries, and it's all 4 main characters with their diaries, sort of maybe in the year after what has happened here, combined in one book.
That would be incredible, because I think there's certainly scope for all of the characters to have their own entries. So we have questions about all of the gang. Even at the end of this book, it leaves it perfectly open for a 4th book, because the plot itself is left that here's the next mystery. We have questions about Shaggy, because we see even more kind of a dynamic character here than ever before, in that we know in part of the book he's seen to have got really upset, and he's also kind of hidden some things at the end of the book. So the diary entries can perhaps explain a little bit more about where they are, why they're where they are. You of course have Fred's character, who kind of is between a decision in this book and finding out a little bit more about what was in his thought process with that, because it's still kind of quite left open for him and Velma as well. So there's still lots of questions about all the characters, and would definitely want to see a 4th book, and I think that could just take so many formats, like you said.
Yeah, I would love to give Fred some more airtime. I think he deserves it.
He doesn't. He started to kind of establish himself really well as a character within that 3rd book, because ultimately I think one thing Daphne and Velma is that the book series did incredibly well, not just for Daphne and Velma are of course amazing, but for me Shaggy was always a character that I never resonated with much. And by the time I reached the end of the 2nd book, he's the character I cared about the most. Aww, it was my favorite adaptation I'd ever seen of him. And so to hear the 3rd book was coming, honestly, his character, I was like, great, I want to see that name on the first page. I want to read all about them. And I think Fred has started to get that same kind of aura about them. It seems like there's more to them in this than there's been in kind of any kind of animated adaptations and stuff like that. So I feel like this is our way at taking a deeper look into all of the characters.
I love that. Yes, totally agree.
So can I ask, do you know kind of what plans there are for the future for either, this book to, if this goes any further, say like a paper copy or anything, or kind of if there's a time when they'd be reviewing to look at a 4th book?
I don't know, but it's one of those things where I stay in close touch with Scholastic. We check in regularly. As soon as they know something, they'll tell me. Again, it's a licensed property, and so it's not just Scholastic's decision, of course. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But we will absolutely keep everyone posted. And really so grateful for the interest and the support. This community is just a delight.
I mean, it's certainly a superb product to want to get behind and see more of, and support further. And also not only that, but I feel like in regards to where Scoob is at the minute, they've been running a TV series for a little while. It's almost time when we'd normally be seeing across like a changeover in series that they're airing, or perhaps they'd like to do quite a few new movies a year and things like that. So if, for example, this were to become a series or a movie, because the books are so great and it would really lend well to, say, a live action either series or movie, is there any, you know, any actors that you had in mind either when you were writing this, or if, for example, someone was to approach you and ask if you wanted to help work on, you know, a live action adaptation, that would spring to mind for you?
Yes. Oh goodness. There are a couple of people that spring to mind immediately. For Velma, I could see Xochitl Gomez, who played the first season of Babysitter's Club as Dawn and now is in the Marvel universe. So she's really taken off. And I just think I could see her as Velma so perfectly. I adore her. And it's funny because for Velma, for Daphne, I went back and forth on this, and then finally I felt like it was staring me in the face. I'm a big Stranger Things fan, and I feel like Sadie Sink would be an excellent Daphne. And it's not just because of the hair. I think she could really play a teenage Daphne, as she's been written in these books, to a really lovely extent.
Yeah, I think when we were discussing kind of who our thoughts were for Daphne as well, but they were certainly someone that sprang to mind because of the kind of new depth to Daphne here, you know, with kind of what's going on with the family, what's going on with Nancy, and all the other things as well, that would certainly lend itself quite well to her.
Yeah. And it's funny, my daughter is almost 8, and she's very into High School Musical, the series. And so I've become familiar with it in terms of like the actors who are on my TV regularly. And the other day I was walking by as she was watching, and Joshua Bassett was on screen. And I thought, oh, he could be Shaggy. Like, there was just something, this immediate visceral reaction to me of like, I bet he could do a good Shaggy.
I think certainly it'd have to be, I don't know, I feel like actors that, like you say, perhaps really can push these new adaptations that do have more depth to them. So, you know, it would be, you know, a gang like we've never seen them before. And to that end, is there anyone else as well, perhaps say for Fred's character? Because I feel like that one is someone that we've really just started to learn about in the new book and where they can go.
Yeah. I went back and forth with Fred, and then not to land on Stranger Things again, but then I could see Finn Wolfhard playing him, you know, dye his hair, bleach his hair. But he's got the depth, I think, to be both that, you know, those sort of dualities of Fred, the like very surface level, popular, easygoing guy, but then could dive into someone a little more emotional and a little more secretive.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And of course he's got the kind of It as well. He's been in It,
Yeah.
the Ghostbusters, so very familiar with the kind of spooky genre. That is absolutely amazing. And I guess the people watching this, I'm going to be putting, you know, all the purchase links in the description as well. I urge people to buy and read the book if you haven't already, because genuinely, like, I will admit right here, right now, I am a book purist, right? And a lot of my heart did kind of sink when I realized that initially we were getting it on the Kindle. I've never read a Kindle before, and prior to that experience, I was kind of like, I feel like I'm gonna want to like just vomit reading like something from a screen. But honestly, like, I feel like I've entered the modern age reading this book because it was just so cool to go through on just the way that it's just, I don't know, I think I've been converted is all I've got to say. So even if you start watching and you are a book purist, you like the touch of a book, the smell of a book, just trust me, it is more than worth it. So I will leave that in the description down below. It is incredible. But, you know, in terms of you, do you have any like kind of upcoming projects that you can talk about, or anything on the horizons that we can share, please?
I don't have anything that I can publicly share yet, but I do have something very exciting happening with one of my previous books. And so hopefully very soon I can share some news. And then separately also working on a new standalone contemporary YA. Not set in the Scooby world, alas, but it's very fun to write, and I will definitely keep you updated.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I guess to like reiterate to people watching, where can they buy a copy of, or buy a version of the third Daphne and Velma book?
Yep. So book 2, The Dark Deception, is available wherever you buy books, whether that's your local bookstore, a big box chain bookstore, or online. And then book 3, Buried Secrets, which just came out on September 6th, is currently only available as an ebook. So you can buy it on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble. And even if you don't have a standalone e-reader, you can read it on your phone or on your computer screen. So I hope you do so.
Yeah, no, that's great. We'll include as many descriptions as we can in the link below. And I guess like the easiest way we found to read it was if you downloaded the Kindle app on your phone, buy it through Amazon, and then you can read it from there. And also, if you're kind of not used to using like Kindle and e-readers and stuff, if you lower the brightness on your phone, it can actually feel like you're reading a book. I really enjoyed it. So thanks so much to everyone for listening. Thank you so much again for your time today. We've really enjoyed being able to speak about this book with you. Certainly, like I said, there were some key parts of the book that I was like making a note of, like, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this too, because it just had an incredible feel to the book. So like we say, if you haven't read it yet, please go and do that. Again, thank you so much for your time today. And yeah, we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Hopefully, you know, any upcoming projects or anything you have, please do let us know. And thanks to everyone for listening.